Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the 2022 gubernatorial elections, my current prediction for these races. So, nothing really special here, we're just going to get right into it with our safe Democratic states. These are the states of California, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland. Maryland's going to be a flip, by the way, because the incumbent Republican governor there, Larry Hogan, isn't running again, and I generally don't rate flips as safe no matter what I'm doing, but Maryland's such a Democratic state that without Hogan, it's basically gone for the GOP. Same with Massachusetts, but Charlie Baker's not going to be running again, so it's basically the same thing. And I believe that is it. Rhode Island you can make an argument for, and actually just out of an abundance of caution, I'll take out Illinois. But, yeah, the Democrats, the reason that they have so few safe states is because, A, this is a pretty good year it's expected to be a pretty good year for Republicans, and B, because these gubernatorial elections are pretty wonky, and a lot of them are closer than they should be. So for the GOP, they've got a few more. Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, which was competitive in 2018. As you can see here, Kristi Noem only won her first election by about 3.4%, so it was quite competitive, but this year, unfortunately for her party, I don't think it'll be unfortunately for the Democrats, I don't think it'll be the same type of result. I expect it to be quite safe. Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina's close. I'll just rate it as safe because Joe Cunningham is a good candidate for the Democrats, don't get me wrong, but he's just in such a Republican year, and Henry McMaster's not like an unpopular governor, so I don't really think it's going to be anything bad. And then New Hampshire and Vermont are also both safe Republican, which I know is usually something you wouldn't see, but yeah, I say these are safe because they both have pretty popular, actually very popular Republicans in Phil Scott and Chris Sununu. And in 2020, both these guys won by like 30, 40-point margins, so I don't expect them to even narrow up a bit. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to put New York as safe Democratic, but yeah, it's safe Democratic. So now for our likely Democratic states, we've got a bunch of these. So Oregon's the first. And the reason Oregon's likely not safe is that there's no incumbent here, and the incumbent for Democrats is pretty unpopular anyways, so Kate Brown is the incumbent Democrat. In 2018, she won, which didn't really do that well, especially considering it was a blue wave. So, in Oregon in 2018, she only won by about 7%. And so, the reason that she did so poorly was because her opponent, Newt Bueller, was a pretty good opponent. He ran a pretty good campaign, and also because Kate Brown's approval ratings were atrocious in this race. And so, she only won with the bare minimum for Oregon Democrats, and she barely crossed 50% of the vote. So, the Oregon Democrats generally don't do as well down ballot as they do at the presidential level, but it's still going to remain a Democratic state. Now, next up is Colorado, and so Colorado is hard to tell because in the polling we've seen, Jared Polis has been doing really well, but it's just, I'll put it as likely just out of an abundance of caution because it was, not competitive in 2020, but it has the capacity to be competitive if things go a certain way, which I don't think they will, but I'm just saying I don't want to put it as safe when it's still like Colorado and not California and New York. So Colorado's going to be likely Democrat. Next up, Illinois is the only one in the Midwest. And the reason that Illinois is likely not safe is because J.B. Pritzker in 2018, yeah, I know he wasn't the incumbent, but he did only win the seat by about 16%, and that was in a blue wave, and he didn't really do particularly well. Like, yeah, he beat an incumbent, so like it wasn't a bad performance, but like he still only got 54% of the vote, and he still was running in a pretty good year for Democrats. So, I wouldn't be stunned if he runs behind Biden in a lot of the Chicagoland suburbs, and I think that's going to cost him some of his margins. So, it'll probably end up being a likely Democratic state. Then you got these two, Connecticut and Rhode Island. And so both these states, I don't think are going to be like competitive. And I think I saw a video where someone had like the Republicans winning the Connecticut gubernatorial election. I was like, what? But anyways, for these states, we're talking about especially for Connecticut, a state that's willing to cross over from a Republican at the more state or like at the more local level. But in terms of governor, Senate, and House and presidential races, it's pretty blue. And in 2018, like I know this race is close, but that was because Ned Lamont had like a historically unpopular approval rating, and like Bob Stefanowski ran a pretty good campaign, and like yeah, it was a blue wave. So if if 2018 was a red wave, Lamont probably would have lost that election. But even though this year's a red wave, I just don't think it's likely to happen. So yeah, I think that's it for our likely Democratic states. For our likely Republican states, they've got a few as well. Alaska's the first. I don't really want to talk about this one. It's just a wacky state, wacky politics. Could get interesting, but Republicans are going to win it. Kansas, which is our first Republican flip of the prediction. Laura Kelly in 2018, she beat off Chris Kobach in that race, and she only won 48% of the vote. She did well, but like she didn't have like this resounding victory the way like Charlie Baker, Phil Scott type did. And so as a result of that, I don't think she is in a really good position for 2022. I expect her to lose by like 8, maybe 9%. And so, Laura Kelly's approval rating is also, like, they aren't bad. Like, they're still, like, I think she's still above water. She's definitely better than Biden in Kansas, but, like, she's still not, like, to win an election as a member of the opposite party in a super partisan state the other way, you really have to like have a high approval rating to have a chance, and she just doesn't have like that great of an approval rating. And besides that, like realistically, Chris Kobach was an atrocious candidate in 2018. He was like the worst possible candidate the GOP could have run, and so is it, like assuming he doesn't run again, which he isn't, it's pretty safe for the Republican Party. Now, next up is the state of Texas, and so this race will get a lot of media attention because Beto O'Rourke is the Democratic nominee here, but like, it's not going to be close. Greg Abbott is not crazy popular the way he was in 2018. Like, he might actually win by a smaller margin than he did in 2018, which would be weird. But like, he's not crazy unpopular, and so it would take a lot to begin with for a Democrat to even come close in Texas. And we're in a red wave. He's not that unpopular. Beto O'Rourke, I don't think has that lightning in a bottle the way he did in 2018. And so, as a result of that, I just don't see it flipping or coming close. I think I wins by something around 10. Maybe 9, maybe 7 if it's good for Democrats. But like, I'd be stunned if Beto does as well as Biden does in Texas. And Biden didn't even do that well in Texas. So that just goes to show how little confidence I have in the Democrats in this race. And next we got Florida. There's not too much to talk about here. The Democratic primary is really interesting between Charlie Crist, Nikki Fried, and Annette Taddeo. Fried is a joke. Like, I'll be honest. Like, the campaign she's running is cringeworthy, and she'd lose to DeSantis by like 10. She's doing really poorly. Charlie Crist is slightly better in terms of electability, as is Annette Taddeo, but neither of them would win. Like, best case, they'd lose by like 5. But at the end of the day, right, like, DeSantis is a pretty popular governor. Like, I know that he gets a lot of media attention. I know a lot of that attention isn't always positive, but, like, let's be real. DeSantis is pretty popular in Florida, and in 2018 he won as a Republican in the blue wave, which is quite impressive, and he did, fairly well in Miami-Dade in the suburbs, and so with Florida having gone so much redder since 2018, I'd be really surprised if it comes within 5. Iowa, same thing. There was a Seltzer poll, and Seltzer's usually really good, that had Reynolds up by 8 over it was, I think, like Deirdre DeGier or something. But point being, Seltzer's usually really good. They always nail the margins, and if Reynolds up by 8, it's not amazing because she has the capacity to win by like 12 or 13 in a red wave, but it still means that she's going to win re-election quite comfortably. So next up is Ohio. Ohio is intriguing because there's an interesting GOP primary there between Mike DeWine and Jim Renacci. I think DeWine's going to win the primary. Renacci isn't a great candidate statewide anyways. Like, he lost to Sherrod Brown in 2018. I think that's kind of fresh on voters' minds, especially Republicans who wanted to win that race. And so I'd be surprised if Renacci wins the primary, but, primaries are really hard to predict. But no matter who it is, whether it's Renacci or DeWine, even though Renacci lost in 2018, he'd still win re-election, or he'd still win this election by at least 6, at least 7. And so even though that Senate race could get interesting, if the Republican Party runs Mike Gibbons or Josh Mandel, that Senate race could get really interesting. But for now, I'm just going to say that both Ohio races are likely Republican, and I think the Senate race is still close in the governor's race. I think that's it for our likely Republican states. Now we're going to go to our lean Democratic states. New Mexico is the first, and so you might be wondering, well, why is New Mexico lean Democratic, right? And so the answer to that is that 2 things, or actually 3 things. The first thing is that Democrats in New Mexico don't really have great trends here. I think New Mexico in the future could become a red state because there are a bunch of rural Hispanic areas down here that haven't really shifted to the right as much as they have in Texas or Florida. And so when that shift happens, I don't know, but it's going to happen at some point, or at least realistically speaking. And yeah. Another reason the Democrats aren't doing well in this race is that the Republicans have their best possible recruit here in Mark Ronchetti. Ronchetti did really well in the 2020 Senate race. He only lost by 6 in a race he was supposed to lose by double or maybe even triple. And so him running a similar campaign in a red wave year is really good news for the Republican Party, because if he came close in a pretty good year for Democrats in 2020, he can win this race as a Republican. I don't think he will. For now, he's not favored, but I think lean Democrat is an inadequate rating for this race. And then lastly, Michelle Lujan Grisham is a scandal that's probably going to cost her in this race, and so I wouldn't be stunned if she loses because of it. So yeah, for now, lean Democrat, but it could get close. It could also not narrow up. We could get some polling in the summer that has Grisham up by like 10. And I wouldn't be as concerned for Democrats as I am now. Next up, we've got Minnesota. Minnesota is probably going to be lean Democrat. I wouldn't be stunned if it's like a tilt type race, but for now I'll say lean Democrat. Tim Walz is a good incumbent. In 2018 he did really well. He won by like I think 11 over Jeff Johnson in this race. Yeah, he won by about 11. And he did really well in a lot of working class areas as well as the suburbs of Minneapolis. So he's overall a pretty dynamic candidate. And so yeah, I would expect Tim Walz to win re-election. Not by like the 11% margin he did in 2018, but I think by 3, 4, maybe 5%. Just because Minnesota is pretty reliably Democratic doesn't mean that it won't swing a little. Because the national environment is going to be, compared to 2018, maybe even 12, 13% more Republican. And so, assuming Minnesota swings the way it is expected to swing and votes the similar way it had in 2018, it would probably be, a narrowly Democratic leaning state, which is what I'm expecting here. So, yeah. Then we've got our last lean Democratic state, which is the state of Maine. So Maine is interesting because Paul LePage, who is the former Republican governor, is running again against Janet Mills. And so Janet Mills in 2018 did okay, but not amazing. So she won with 51% of the vote, and she did okay in like the rural area. She did better than Biden in most of Maine's second district, like the northern rural part of the state. She did worse in a lot of these southern counties that are more urban or more suburban and more college educated. And so that could be interesting to see, because to me, it's pretty clear that the working class rural areas of Maine aren't really coming back for Democrats. But it'll be interesting to see if the Republicans and Paul LePage can try to get those margins back to where they were in 2014 or 2016 in the southern, more suburban part of Maine. And so if that happens, this race is in play. If not, Janet Mills' play wins. For now, I'll have it as leaning Democratic, but I wouldn't be stunned if the GOP pulls up an upset here, especially if tonight's really good for Republicans. So for our lean Republican states, I think I've only got 2 for now, which is less than you might expect. So Wisconsin's the first, and I think especially last year there were a lot of people who were hesitant to say the GOP would be favored in Wisconsin, especially in the governor's race, because Tony Evers being the incumbent Democrat, I think a lot of people expected him to be able to hold on in a red wave, especially considering in 2018 he knocked off a Republican incumbent that he was expected to lose that race. People thought like if you're doubting him again, he might win re-election, but I just don't think that's going to happen. Realistically, Wisconsin is going to swing quite a bit to the right. And as a result of that, the GOP is going to gain basically everywhere, especially in the WOW counties. And by the way, the reason that Tony Evers won in 2018 wasn't because he did super well with suburban voters in the WOW counties. Like, Biden won in Wisconsin because he did well with suburbanites. The reason that Evers won was because he did well with working class voters. And I think it's pretty clear, like I said in Maine, that working class voters are gone for Democrats. Like, with the exception of Amy Klobuchar, Sherrod Brown, they're basically gone for Democrats. And so in Wisconsin, with someone like Tony Evers who did well with them but not amazing, I think they're gone. And I think that's what's going to cost him re-election. And so as a result of that, GOP win Wisconsin. Then my other lean Republican state's Georgia, and so I was originally pretty high on the Republicans in Georgia, especially in this governor's race. By the Senate race is a pure toss-up. I'll talk about that in another video in my podcast. By the way, check out my podcast. It's on Twitter. It's at PM Podcast 2022, or at PM Podcast 2022, and on Spotify, just look up Politics Matters or Ryan Chekabowski. That's my name. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Just listen to my podcast. I'd really appreciate it. I talk a lot about the Georgia Senate race, but point being, the governor's race, I was originally quite optimistic for the Republican Party, but like Brian Kemp has surged in popularity, right? Like he's not popular or like super popular, right? But he's surged in popularity because like if you remember in 2021 or beginning of 2021 and end of 2020, he was really unpopular with the Trump base because Trump really wasn't as a rhino who wasn't going to overturn the election for whatever reason, and so as a result of that, Kemp lost a lot of popularity with the Republican Party and ultimately partially cost this party the runoffs. But now it's better. That's kind of worn off. And by the way, his opponent David Perdue in that primary would probably make this race a little closer because I think Perdue is a worse candidate than Kemp. But either way, if Kemp gets the nomination, I think he'll be fine. Even though Stacey Abrams is a really good candidate, I think Kemp will be fine if he gets the nomination. So now for our teal Democratic states, I've only got 2 of these, and so both these are kind of hot takes, and I think a lot of people are going to disagree with me on these, but whatever. So first, Nevada, and there was a lot of talk, especially over last summer, that Steve Sisolak was going to lose re-election, and not going to lie, I mean, it's possible. It's maybe a coin flip, maybe a little more of a coin flip towards Steve Sisolak, but like it's possible the Republicans win this race. The reason that I don't think they do win this race is because of polarization in Nevada. Nevada does not swing. In 2016, it was a state that Clinton won by 2.4, and in 2020, a state that Biden won by 2.4. And I get that Clinton tried to win Nevada more than Biden did, which is why it stayed the same despite the 2020 got more blue. But like in the Senate and governor's races in Nevada in 2018, they only swung a little bit towards Democrats in states like Arizona or Colorado, where New Mexico swung like massively towards Democrats. And so Nevada, I do think the Republicans have a good chance here, but Sisolak for now being the incumbent, I don't think they'll have him favored. But like we have to get more polling, right? Like we have to see what the polls are for this race. Like, we have to see what a lot of people are saying here. And so for now, I'll have this teal Democrat because of the incumbency for Sisolak. But like, I really want to look more at this race in the coming months. Then our last Democratic state, Pennsylvania. This is definitely the hot take of the video because I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but hear me out. The Democrats have a really good recruit here, Josh Shapiro, who's the incumbent attorney general, who in 2020, by the way, won his election by 5%. He's no performer in a state that Biden won by 1, he won by 5. So clearly there's, a lot of voters in Pennsylvania who are going to vote Republican but are going to cross over for Shapiro. And the Republicans do not really have a good candidate here. They're either going to run Doug Mastriano or Lou Barletta. And Barletta lost the 2018 governor's race, and Mastriano's a really bad candidate anyways. And so both these candidates are subpar for the GOP, and I wouldn't be stunned if, they underperform. And so despite the fact that I think the Senate race is going to go Republican, I do not think that this governor's race is going to go Republican. It's really close. It's probably the closest on this map, to be honest. Maybe Arizona, but it could also be Pennsylvania. But I just, the thing that people forget, and I tweeted this, by the way, so go follow me on Twitter because I tweet bangers. The thing that people forget is that not all races are going to universally swing to the right in 2022. A lot of them will. Most of them will. But in 2014, I think something like 90 House seats swung towards Democrats. In 2018, a few House seats and governorships and Senate races swung towards Republicans. So there are going to be some random races where Democrats do surprisingly well. And, the majority of surprise will be in favor of the GOP because it's going to be their night. But, there will be a few races where the Democrats do well. And this will be one of them, I think. Pennsylvania just has, it's not as bad for Democrats in midterms as other states are. And I think that as a result of this, Pennsylvania is just going to narrowly stay blue. I mean, I could be wrong, but I guess that's kind of just my hot take for the video. So now the last two are two Republican states. Michigan, I think it's closer to lean than toss up, and I've been saying that Michigan is competitive for a year now. James Craig is a really good candidate. He's doing everything he needs to do in this race. And Gretchen Whitmer is a fine incumbent, but she's not popular enough to hold off this massive red wave that's going to be facing her. So I think as a result of that, Michigan narrowly going to go flip for the GOP, probably by under a point, to be honest. But Craig winning the election here. And then Arizona is really close. So I think that the Arizona GOP made a massive miscalculation, or not really the GOP, but Trump did when he endorsed Carrie Lake, because Carrie Lake is not very electable. She's not a great candidate. She's, said a lot of, I think, polarizing things that are going to hurt her with suburban voters. And the Arizona GOP would have been much better going with someone like Kimberly Yee, who's won elections statewide before, who's actually had experience before, who's actually overperformed before, whereas Carrie Lake is a news anchor who, doesn't have that experience or doesn't have that ability to galvanize support for Republicans in Maricopa County. Now, that being said, it's still a red wave. Arizona still, I think, is unfavorable to Democrats in this environment, especially to Mark Kelly. But yeah, this race is a toss-up in my eyes, but I think the GOP are narrowly going to win it. So that's it for this video. It's about 20 minutes long, which is pretty good for me because I have a tendency to make half an hour long governor predictions, and I wanted to shorten it, so I was kind of not super in depth on all these races because there are just so many races to cover here. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at Ryan Jakubowski. Do whatever you want with the channel. Yeah, but that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Have a great rest of your day.